Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Wednesday's session of GETDigital. My name is Caroline and I'm the marketing manager here within DCU Business School. So delighted to welcome all of you this morning. Throughout the week at GETDigital, we're exploring a range of topics related to business leadership and entrepreneurship with a particular focus on how business of all stages and of all sizes can harness transformational digital technologies to achieve their business goals. So chatbots are the topic of today's session, this morning's session, and I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker. That's Ronan Dalton. He's Chief Architect and CTO at IBM Ireland. And he'll be talking this morning about chatbots uncovered, what, where, and how. And he'll be sharing with us today his insights into the AI phenomenon of the virtual assistant, aka the chatbot, and examine the use of chatbots across industries to improve customer experience and lower costs, as well as looking at the steps you need to take involved in building your own first bot with Watson, the IBM chatbot. In terms of general housekeeping, I would just say that we welcome and anticipate getting lots of questions, and you can use the Q&A function. So chat is disabled this morning, so please send us your questions in through Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end of Ronan's presentation. And I'm sure we'll have many of them on this very, very interesting topic. So without any further ado, I'll hand you over to Ronan. Ronan, you are very welcome this morning, and thanks for being with us, and really looking forward to this talk.
Brilliant. Thank you, Caroline, and good morning, folks. I can see I'm just looking at the participants. I see there's 23 of us, including the 4 panelists. So welcome to the 19 attendees that are.
It'll rise up as people log on and get their coffee from downstairs, I'm sure.
Right. So this morning's session, is focused on chatbots, and as Caroline mentioned, what I plan to do, I guess, is Caroline used this word earlier, to demystify a little, I guess, some of the use cases around when a chatbot could and should be used, and then I guess talk a little about how one might go about building their own bot. I work for IBM. Let me share my screen actually so that you can see some slides and not be looking at me only. To share desktop. So hopefully you can all see my slides. I'll go into full screen mode here. So as I was about to say, so I work for IBM, and I work as the Chief Architect and CTO for the IBM Ireland business. I've thrown in my Twitter handle here. If folks are Twitterers, you'll find me there at Daltonology, and I don't know if you fancy taking screen grab some shot at some point and tweeting it, give us an old mention, and that would be nice to see. Right, so for today's session, then chatbots, let's get stuck in and go through some of the material as promised. So I'm kind of assuming, right, that mostly by virtue of being here today, that you have a sense of what a chatbot is. And on this first slide here, I thought I'd just mention that virtual assistant term, because I sometimes think that chatbot diminishes the importance of what is that conversational AI, that virtual assistant, as I've labeled it here, that can support an end user with queries through a variety of different channels, not just text, right? So throwing it out just early, right? So you might hear me interchangeably use the term virtual assistant or chatbot. I try and elevate to virtual assistant, but chatbot sneaks in every now and again. And I titled this session chatbot, just thinking it was maybe a term that might resonate more readily with those that see the session. Virtual assistant might feel a little bit salesy or marketing-y. Not that that's a bad thing, right? That's cool, of course, right? But so quick mention there. So as I say, I figured by virtue of you being here, you know what a chatbot is, right? But for those that don't, last night, pulling together the few slides that I'm sharing with you here today, I thought I'd just do this, right? Throw into a Google search and get back this dictionary definition of chatbot. And on a few instances, I'm afraid this morning, I will break the golden rule of presenting and maybe read a couple of bits off of my slides rather than talk to everything that's here. And in this instance, I'll read the definition that's on the screen, right? And it's the chatbot being called out as that computer program designed to simulate conversation with human users, especially over the internet, right? So so if we break that down into its constituents, right? So it's a computer program, and typically, you know, nowadays the chatbot, in terms of the program that's involved, they are much less rules based and much more AI based, right? So now, you know, with the advancements in, you know, natural language processing, and the ability for a virtual assistant or a chatbot to be able to interpret either the spoken word or the written text in a way that it's contextualized and understood, and in turn can go and, you know, address the query that's been asked or the statement that's been made. You know, AI is what typically underpins that capability, right? So trivializing, I guess, with a computer program, but typically now, you know, any of the chatbots that you'll see on the market are underpinned by a level of AI. You know, focusing on this simulating conversation with human users, you know, that's the, I guess, the goal here, right? With these chatbots, is that they can hold that conversation as a machine with a human in a way that, you know, end user queries can be addressed. And again, maybe repeat myself a little bit, they can be addressed via, you know, queries that are asked through the spoken word or written text or other medium for that matter, right? But chatbots becoming pervasive, really, I think, now, in terms of the adoption of technology, of a technology rather, and increasingly, actually, just, you know, with the job that I have in IBM, I see chatbots as being one of the first toes that get dipped into the water by organizations as they look to embrace AI, right? There's often very quick wins to be had through the deployment of a virtual assistant on an organization's website. You know, start or pretend, go with the text-based virtual assistant deployed on the website. There's often very quick returns to be had through very minimal investment up front that can allow for the organization to start to go on that journey, you know, to embrace AI. So you know, I mentioned AI, and I mentioned it quite a bit as I talked about the chatbot there. I'm not sure if I mentioned conversational AI. I probably did. In the context of the chatbot, but it's that field of AI that supports the chatbot, the virtual assistant, to be able to, you know, work and with humans in the way that they do, right? So again, breaking some of the golden rules of presenting here, with just doing a little bit of reading off of a slide. You know, conversational AI technologies like chatbots or voice assistants, right, which I'm sure we all use and have in our homes. I know I'm guilty of having a couple of Amazon Echoes around the house, and again, you know, in terms of the adoption of AI, just going off on a quick steer here, it's I've small kids, not so small anymore, but it was fascinating to see them a few years ago when they were a little bit younger, and how quickly they could easily pick up, you know, asking Alexa to play a song on Spotify, or the usual, you know, tell me a joke, right? But that's a good example of, you know, conversational AI interpreting the spoken word. You know, so the chatbot or the voice assistants which end users can talk to. Leveraging technologies like machine learning and natural language processing, NLP, that I mentioned earlier, right? And NLP being that field of AI that allows for machines to, you know, interpret the spoken word, written text in context in a way that it can be, you know, better understood, and allow for the machine to have those human type characteristics when engaging in a conversation with an end user. So chatbots, virtual assistants, easy, you know, getting started means when embracing AI, typically, you know, underpinned by conversational AI, in fact, almost invariably underpinned by conversational AI nowadays, in order to give that human-like experience when engaging with the virtual assistant. Common use cases, right? So common use cases in business for the virtual assistant are these customer or employee self-service type scenarios. And so what do I mean by that, right? So the customer self-service one, I think, well, both of them are probably quite self-explanatory, right? But it's the ability for that customer of an organization to engage with the organization in the way that they can ask questions around whatever it might be, you know, the service that's being offered, the opening hours of the store, but to ask a question of a business in a way that they can readily receive a response without that response being served by a human. And right then and there, I think that advantage might be seen. And I think in another slide or two we talk a bit about those advantages. But that then and there, that advantage can be seen around that human isn't needed to provide the response to that question that can come in at any hour of the day or night. And so the costs that are involved with having the human potentially in the position that they need to be in a position to address the queries that customers might have are negated by AI, right? So there's no longer the need for the human to be sitting in the contact center, let's say, for example, answering the query that's coming in over the phone, but instead that query being addressed by the virtual assistant, by AI, and by a chatbot. In that customer self-service scenarios. So I think some of the bits that I mentioned here, that example of needing help with bills or file for unemployment or rebook flights, some of the examples that are listed there. The employee self-service, I mean, it's almost the very same use case. It's just almost behind the firewall of the organization, right? And it's where an employee in an organization might have a query around, let's say, a HR policy or maybe related to that, a payroll type query. And again, in terms of a large organization that might have, a payroll hotline that, has folks that staff it that need to be able to sit there and answer queries over the phone, potentially expensive resource to do that. With a virtual assistant, you have the ability to train the assistant on, usually actually the getting started approach is train the assistant on the frequently asked questions, right? The questions that are the ones that are, the 20% of questions that are asked 80% of the time. You train the virtual assistant to field those in a way that then that human resource that I've mentioned a few times now, can be freed up, right, to better address the more complicated queries that might otherwise be coming in from, in this employee self-service scenario, would come in from other employees. So both of these really, really common, really, really pervasive, I guess, certainly in the customer self-service space. And I think more and more, we see on websites from organizations, be it, whatever business it is and whatever service it is that they produce or products it is that they sell, that there are virtual assistants available on their site to address queries with varying degrees of quality in terms of the responses that are received. And then on the employee self-service side, I think that's being pulled along behind in terms of the adoption of these virtual assistants. But I know, again, well, actually, I didn't say when I simply mentioned I work for IBM, but I work with in a client-facing CTO role for IBM, and so I work with customers day in, day out in Ireland here, and I see this employee self-service use case as being one that's been being pulled along, I guess, by the understanding of the value that can be brought through customer self-service, but more and more organizations are embracing this AI, this chatbot, this virtual assistant, as, again, repeat myself, dipping the toe in the water, embracing AI in a way that the investment up front is quite low, but the return is quite high, with the value that can be brought to the employee, right? So the HR scenario is one that springs to mind, and one that I know we've implemented with a couple of organizations here in Ireland. The benefits, I guess, of that conversational AI for self-service, be it for the customer or for the employee scenario. So, looking at the bottom element of this slide, we're talking about the ability to personalize and improve customer experience, by virtue of the virtual assistant, the chatbot, being available online 24/7. Right there, you've got an advantage, in terms of the coverage that you've got for customers to be able to ask queries and get questions addressed. The one that I've kind of mentioned a number of times maybe already is that the minimizing contact center operational costs. So contact center, that being the call center, that being the place where, at a time when we could go to the office, there would be tens, if not hundreds, of humans in a physical location with infrastructure provided that supports them in taking calls, and having access to systems to be able to look for answers to questions that folks are ringing in with, the customers are ringing in with, our employees are ringing in with, where the chatbot, the virtual assistant, can be positioned to address, as I mentioned, let's say the 80% of those, the 20% of those questions that are asked 80% of the time. You can immediately see that there's a benefit to be had in terms of reducing the operational costs of the contact center, but then very much, in a business context, positioning, well, look, what you're looking to achieve here is not, the takeout of resource, but rather to, maybe to this next point in terms of improving customer SaaS, rather working with the existing resource that you have, those individuals that are in the contact center, but elevating their ability to spend more time on the more intricate questions that come through from customers that can in turn be served more, more in a more detailed way, in a more adequate manner. So by virtue of their time being freed up, not answering those, 20% frequently asked questions, right? So I think that business case is one. Again, in terms of me saying that AI and the chatbot being that easy on-ramp for a lot of organizations, and that starting point, that business case can be quite readily articulated around, the investment in AI, the virtual assistant, the training that's involved there, right? These things don't, the virtual assistant doesn't just out of the box know all the answers to the questions that it's going to be asked. There is an element of, building the solution, integrating it with your systems, training the AI on the queries that are asked, building in that conversational experience that will allow for the end user to have a pleasant human-like interaction with the virtual assistant. Those are all the elements, I guess, that go into building the bot, the virtual assistant, but the cost that goes into that can in turn be offset with the benefits that can be seen through the costs that are reduced in the contact center, and the ability for the contact center agent to better address queries that are coming through from customers or from employees, for that matter. So to this next point, then maybe I've covered this rather well, right? But that reduce the risks that high demand will impact CSAT. Well, that high demand, again, if you think of that contact center and that human context, your ability to scale there, is quite tricky, right? Because you've got a finite number of people that have spent time to understand the queries that they might be asked, to be able to provide the answers that are accurate to those queries. And you've got infrastructure that's required to support those humans, to be able to address those questions. Well, with AI and with machines, and actually with the adoption of cloud technology, and actually so many vendors now are providers of, virtual assistant technology, deliver off of their cloud platform. Ourselves, IBM, AWS, Microsoft, others, we're all at it. That's our primary route to delivery is through our cloud platforms. But with this reducing the risk that high demand will impact CSAT. On a high demand, peak demand means the calls are being dropped; they're not being taken by the humans. You want your ability to scale, as I was trying to articulate a moment ago, is not as elastic as it might be, where what you're looking to scale with the AI and the chatbot context is a machine learning cluster on a cloud platform that actually you don't really have visibility to and don't need to really worry about. But actually on the human and on the physical side of things, you got to train, you got to hire new people, you got to train up new people, you got to get physical infrastructure in place for them to be able to take in calls, be able to access systems and address queries. And so you can see there that, right, so high demand is much more difficult to address in the contact center scenario than it is with the the chatbot, the AI type, cloud delivered AI type scenario. And then I think I've said this a whole bunch of times as well, is, you know, that ROI, that return on investment, that business case can be very readily made around the adoption of this technology because of all of the things that I've just discussed, right? The fast cycle to deliver the virtual assistant online through multiple channels potentially. We look at that in a moment, and the ability to either, you know, save in the contact center or elevate your contact center staff to deliver better service when it comes to the queries that they're being asked. Right, so so some of the benefits and reasons to embrace here. So in terms of, you know, conversational AI and it being at the heart of your business. So one of the things that I mentioned, you know, through the course of the last few minutes is that, you know, these virtual assistants, these chatbots, can be delivered in very many ways, right? And if we look at the left hand, as I look at my screen, the left hand side of the screen, the customer end user scenario, right? It's quite typical that the virtual assistant will, in order to provide the greatest level of coverage, be delivered in an omni-channel way, right? Omni-channel being, you know, as many channels as we can deliver that the technology will allow us and that end users will expect to engage with, right? So, you know, deliver that through the web-based interface. Again, I think that's where most folks start. In fact, in all of the projects and client engagements that I've had, that's where they've all started, is with the web interface, you know, quickly extending to the mobile. To the mobile and beyond, then, in terms of integrating with other messaging platforms, right? So why should we expect the end user, if what they like using is Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp as a means to message, then, you know, why should we really on a mobile platform ask them to go to the mobile instance of our site and bring up our virtual assistant there? Or actually, if we had a contact number through WhatsApp that would allow them to engage with our virtual assistant, then wouldn't that be a nice end user experience? And yes, it would. And so, you know, increasingly, you know, that channel being embraced. And I know myself, actually, some of the service providers that I engage with as a citizen, actually, you know, the TV service provider that my mom has, I'm often asking questions around that, and I actually go straight to their WhatsApp first to get some support. To, you know, delivering through robotic solutions and voice agents I mentioned earlier. And I think that picture is a picture of an Echo. And then on the other side, right, on the right hand side, I guess one of the elements of this conversational AI that I haven't touched off of yet, right, is yes, there's that employee self-service type scenario, but there's also this scenario where, you know, when the when the queries are coming through from, you know, the virtual assistant, the chatbot, and another very common scenario is that, you know, when the bot can't answer the question, right, or comes to the extent of the training that you provided, and you want to be able to hand over to the human, right? So again, the AI taking the, you know, the 80%, I'm getting that wrong again, the 20% of the questions to get asked 80% of the time, the easier ones to respond to. But when that query is one of the, you know, broader field that the AI can't answer, it's a very common pattern to want to be able to hand over the conversation to a human, to a live agent behind the scenes who can address the more intricate details behind the query. And so, you know, this pattern is yet another one that sees, you know, the adoption of AI in business and the extension of its value to the organization in a way that, you know, we're not just now dealing with trained AI, but with trained AI that has limitations, and that in turn, when those limitations are reached, can be addressed by the human. That's the SME that has access to systems, and that can deal with the angry customer, right? That maybe the AI can't deal with quite so well, right? So different facets here to the conversational AI being at the heart of the business. At one point, I guess that I might have mentioned or skirted around a few times is often, you know, this lower tier here, and this, I don't know what you call it, a marketecture diagram, right? You know, it's certainly not an architecture diagram, but, you know, that the AI that has access to enterprise systems, right? So the AI that has access to the customer relationship management system, the the ordering system, the billing system. And so, where you train your AI to be able to answer queries, you want it to be able to access other systems that are the systems of record that provide the responses to, what is my take home for what is my take home salary this month? I wouldn't expect the AI to know that. I expect the AI to understand that I'm asking a question of it around my salary and to know who I am, but in turn to go and ask the system of record, the payroll system, what my take home will be for that given month, right? So that integration to enterprise systems being a very important point to get some real value from the AI. Just bear with me one sec. So in terms of looking at then some best practices in the user experience, and actually I have to say in the projects that I've worked on with clients, the technology and the technology, the training of the virtual assistant, the integration, if that's required, to those enterprise systems that I just mentioned a moment ago. I used that random payroll example. The technology tends to be not the hard part. What tends to be the hard part, or at least the part that a lot of time, is invested in, is this conversational user experience, is training the AI to engage with the human in a conversational manner that the human is comfortable with, that can adequately address their question, that delivers a style of conversation that is pleasant, right? And so actually a lot of time goes into this user experience element, as much, if not more, sometimes, than the technology side of the house. And so, we look at some of the best practices that are called out here, so this engage through this natural seeming chatbot interaction, the omni-channel piece we mentioned a moment ago, and I think that's very important. And I see all of most of the clients that I have worked with in this space, leveraging more than just a single channel for their virtual assistants. What's this? Chatbots are the unified endpoint for scalable engagements and automation. Indeed, the functional or transactional bot use cases. Yeah. So functional, those end user queries that are taking the frequently asked questions type scenario, versus the transactional, where in fact what you want the virtual assistant to be able to do is, perform a transaction, right? Whether it's to instruct the virtual assistant to pay, a friend or a business based on, a conversation that you're having with the virtual assistant, is another scenario that is being explored. That delightful user experience. And this important one, I think this last one here around that maintaining context, and you see it all the time. I think you see it all the time. For those of you that have hit chatbots, you see that they often remember you when you come back, right? So that maintaining the context, you come back and they have a welcome back. They've set a cookie on the page on which you're after hitting in your browser, and they know you're back. Or in the case of Watson, and I've tried not to be saying too much about our Watson technology to come across as though I'm trying to push you on a single technology here. But in the case of the Watson IBM technology, maintaining context for that end user, well, maybe they have a conversation around, maybe it's a transactional conversation around a banking use case, and they need to step away for a moment, but come back and pick up the conversation, and the virtual assistant can pick up the conversation where it was left off, maintain that context, understand that you've already given me your customer number or the likes, and progress the conversation, so that it's not that clunky, okay, you're back, you got to start from zero experience, but it's again maintaining that context. So I think I've flogged this one to death through other messaging right around that customer service value add, right, in terms of the embracing of the chatbot and the AI, right? But being able to better serve the customer. The agent assist scenario is actually that scenario where, I mentioned that the agent, who is the human, has the AI, the chatbot available to him or her to be able to answer queries actually while live on the phone. And that's another scenario. Maybe I didn't touch off that one actually, but whilst live on, whilst live on the phone, you see the headset on the little picture there, to be able to ask as an agent, a virtual assistant inside of the organization, queries that the end user are passing to him or her, to be able to get more accurate and timely answers to the customer that's calling in. And then off the back of all of this, right, something I didn't touch on, and I'm conscious I want to show you some of this and bring it to life. So I'll stop with the slides in a moment, because I'm hoping you're still with me and I'm not boring you to death as I go through these PowerPoint slides. I'll do a little demo in a moment, but this last point that I didn't touch off, right, around the contact center insights. And so that's actually when, so much of what's being driven into the contact center is being driven through AI, or in fact, maybe not hitting the contact center because AI is addressing it. Then you've got the ability to have additional AI, should we call it, or just quite simply analysis of the conversations that are being had, right? So when queries are coming in through an organization via the virtual assistant, via the chatbot, those chat logs can be analyzed, on the other side of the engagement, right, by the business, that can see, do you know what, we're hitting a lot of questions. We're getting a lot of questions around our store opening times. Make it really simple. So you know what, we need to make it a little bit more obvious that we're open from 9 till 9 every day, because people probably aren't dropping into our stores. This is when people could go to stores, which hopefully we can again soon. But a simple example, analyze chat logs. People are asking a lot about what time we're open, but much more intricate questions. I'm a bank, and people are asking lots of questions about our new mortgage product. Okay, it must be difficult for them to understand. They mustn't be able to pick up the information that they need quite readily. Maybe we haven't shared enough information around this mortgage product. Maybe when people ask questions around this mortgage product, we can pick up the tone of the conversation, because there are tone analyzer tools that can do that, and can see that actually when people are engaging with our virtual assistant, asking questions about this mortgage product, they're angry. They think actually that, it's a scam project, or it's a scam product, or it's the interest rates are unfavorable, or whatever it might be. But again, that those insights can be taken out of the contact center into the business, and the business can then in turn pivot on, okay, well, we need to do something about, our opening hours or our mortgage product. Examples off the top of my head. To this one, right? And then I will to take a quick look at a demo. But actually, I was doing these slides very late last night, and so I used whatever I could pull together to hand. And so these examples are actually out of country, but we've plenty in country. But we're actually virtual assistants were used and came to the fore actually just around this time last year. As we were all in Ireland here, at least, we'd been locked down a few weeks at this stage last year, and there was a lot of information that was being shared around by health services around COVID. Around not just COVID, but around what support offerings they were making available to citizens who were finding themselves in these so strange, circumstances that folks felt they couldn't go to the shops. Elderly folks were cocooning at the time, if you remember, and wouldn't go to the store to pick up their groceries. Yet, county councils around Ireland formed this community call initiative, where the county councils stood up contact centers and shared information around available services that were available for citizens in their region. Last year, actually, again, this time last year, and probably right through into the summer, and maybe even a little beyond, did lots of work. So here's some of the international examples. We did lots of work in country with county councils here, in standing up virtual assistants on their site to be able to address and try and deflect, from some of the questions actually hitting the contact center, but to allow for people to go online and hit. I'm not sure I'm at liberty to name all the county councils that we've worked with, but you'll see virtual assistants on their site, and a lot of them are ones that we delivered with for them and with them. But to address those citizen questions, and that was a real world citizen tech for good scenario, right? That I think I know IBM certainly embraced, and I'm sure a lot of the others that provide technology in this space also maybe offered and supported organizations that were offering information or services for citizens and made them available through that easy interface, that chatbot. So some US examples there with Healthcare of Atlanta, City of Austin, 'and' the Czech Republic. Okie dokie, right. So yeah, so to the IBM bit, right? So I work for IBM, and the tool that we use to build these virtual assistants, virtual assistant chatbots is called Watson Assistant, right? So what we'll do now, I said I'd talk until maybe 10, and then hopefully there's some questions that have come through, and I can field questions then afterwards. What I'll do now, right, is maybe step out of slides and let you have a quick look at building one of these virtual assistants. So if I go to my browser here, right? So and I'm hoping you're all still seeing. I'm sharing my entire screen, so you should be able to see.
Yeah, we can still see Ronan.
Brilliant. So to build one of these bots, right, it is that easy, right? And you don't need to be a developer or a coder to get started and to have a virtual assistant on your website, today. And it is as quick as today, right? So we deliver them, as I said, off of the technology, I guess, that we provide that supports the infrastructure behind the chatbot. We deliver off of our cloud platform. We also, not to do IBM a disservice, we can also, for customers that are concerned around, well, we don't actually want our AI running in your cloud, we want it running in our data center. We do that too, right? But this isn't a sales pitch. But we deliver off our cloud platform, and so does I think the vast majority of other providers that deliver technology around virtual assistants. This cloud.ibm.com, I mean, for those that are that way inclined, you can register for an account, a free account. And actually what I've done this morning is log in with my free account. I work for IBM, so obviously I have a paid account and full access to all stuff, but I thought for this demo purposes, I'd make sure I just log in with a free account as well. So whatever I see is whatever you'll see with a free account. So cloud.ibm.com. On our catalog here, right, you'll see there's loads of different services, as you'd expect from a cloud services provider, technology-oriented services. But actually the ones that we're interested in here, if I go to this AI machine learning space, you see there's a bunch of AI machine learning services. I won't look at each, but the one that's important here is this one called Watson Assistant. You click into that, and what you should be able to do is create an instance of this with your free account. I'll be told that I can't actually, because I've already created one of these instances, and I'm only allowed on my free account one of them, which is fine, because for one instance of this, I can have 5 virtual assistants. So just to show you there quick. But if I go back then to my environment and really quick go into an instance of Watson Assistant here. So, I've got a service that I've already provisioned. It's one of those Watson Assistant instances that I mentioned a moment ago. And I click into the link to access the service. And then when this next page loads for me, I get this Launch Assistant button. And in here, we get a whole bunch of tooling that makes it really easy to build a virtual assistant. And while I talked about things like conversational AI a moment ago, and when I talked about things like natural language processing, all of that is abstracted away from you with the tooling that we provide around building a virtual assistant. You don't need to know anything about conversational AI or machine learning or the likes to build a virtual assistant, a chatbot. You'll get by default this My First Assistant. Why don't I just not use the default and call it the GETDigital, and correct my spelling. And I'll go ahead and I'll create that assistant. And then with the assistant, we have this concept of a dialogue skill, right? So this dialogue skill, this is where, you would have heard me say, as I talked to slides earlier, that there's training that goes into building an assistant. That training, when you think of the machine learning context, is actually, example questions with well-defined responses that you give your virtual assistant, so that when it sees similar type questions in the future, it knows, okay, that's one of those questions of that type. So the answer is quite likely going to be one of them that are related to that bucket. That's what I mean by training, right? And it's in this dialogue skill that you provide that training. So I thought, again, rather than use what's out of the box, if I said, and this was just, again, top of my head this morning, thinking of an example I could create. So hopefully this isn't sort of negative saying GETDigital, our COVID bot, right? Let's call it the COVID skill, because it was an easy one for me to think of. And I say I create this dialogue skill. Now that I have this dialogue skill, I go and I create these things called intents. This is where I'm training the virtual assistant. These are the example questions that I think that this assistant is going to get. We're going to host it on our website. on our website, it's going to say, have you got questions around COVID-19? And so we're narrowing the funnel, as to the domain that we want end users to ask questions on. And now, we have to think of, as the designers of this virtual assistant, well, what are the questions that we might get? And it's in this intent space that we define the questions, right? So if I create one called C19 symptoms, because we think one of the questions that people might ask us is, well, what are the symptoms of this horrible COVID thing? And so, in terms of training, example questions, and we need to provide at least 5, right? So what are the COVID symptoms? And I need to just make up a couple of other of these really quick. So, I could just shorten it to COVID symptoms and that one. And then I could say what are symptoms, because I'm kind of thinking we're already in a domain of, people they know that this is the COVID virtual assistant. How we'll do a couple of this. Thinking of examples. So now that I've trained under the covers, I've trained a natural language classifier, right? So from an AI perspective, under the covers, a natural language classifier is being created. It's created a class that's called this C19 symptoms. And when it sees things that are like this, it'll say they're of the type C19 symptoms. So someone's asking us a question about C19 symptoms, we better tell them what the answer is. So the way in which we build that and orchestrate that in the virtual assistant is through this thing called a dialogue. We'll always get this welcome node, right? So we say, welcome, or sorry, it's here. Hi, how can I help you? And so maybe we change that. We'll say, when I mentioned earlier, like people spend a lot of time in terms of the user experience for the virtual assistant. This type of language that's used, is it informal? Is it a hey? Because I'm being hosted in an informal space and we're an informal business, or is it a hello, I'm a banking bot, or is it, or not even a bot? And even those decisions are design and user experience decisions that go into the building of a virtual assistant. Do we even reveal that this is AI, or do we want people to feel like talking to a human? But but here we just do, hey, I'm a COVID-19 bot, how can I help you, is what they're going to see when they log into or when they hit this bot for the first time. And then under this, I'm going to add a node, and I'm going to say that, if someone asks me a question that looks like they're asking about COVID-19 symptoms, I'm going to give them an answer that says the C19 symptoms are, and then I might, what are they? I don't know, a new cough, and fevers. That's just fever. I don't know them off. I don't know them all off the top of my head. But just for example purposes, and then we might want, again, in terms of orchestrating the conversation, right? We don't want to just give them don't want to give the end user a dead end answer like that. We're trying to design a conversation here. So we might want to prompt them then to say, well, these are the symptoms. Do you have symptoms, right? So we're prompting the end user to give us a response so that we can further the conversation, narrowing it down, hopefully to get the end user what they're looking for here. So with this, right, we've built our first bot, right? So boom. If I just make sure that I set that to multi-line, because you'll see I have 2 lines there on the screen. If I say try it, we've got this internal kind of try it out pane for those that are the virtual assistant builders. Here's our welcome, hey, on the COVID-19, and then I ask what are the COVID symptoms, and I get my answer. Whoa, nice, cool. I've got a bot, and you see how we can build up a flow here then, where the end user, now if I was to answer something here, it's not being trained, so we can't address it, but you can see how I'm leading the end user into a place where I want them to ask or to answer. Let's say they answer, I have a cough, and then you might answer, well, have you got a fever, or any of these other questions? Because I think, don't they ask you, have you got a couple together or something like that? But and then you might say, well, hey, you want to go to your doctor or something. So you can see how you can build up that flow really quickly and have a virtual assistant that's ready to go actually in just a couple of minutes. And it is literally ready to go, right? Because the last thing I'll do, even though I'm making this a super trivial example, is, you can now, go and go back to this, so I said that, the GETDigital assistant with the skill we've just trained. And if I say to it, look, I want to add integrations, we provide these out of the box integrations. And if I say, look, I want to add the web chat integration, and just create it, that allows me really quickly drop that bot. Actually, well, what does this look like? No, that's a bit, we could have that nice UI, but haven't trained it enough on the question, so they're not picking up the question. But I can really quickly, with just this little bit of script, go and drop this onto a web page and have, I didn't fire up a text editor earlier. So if I just really quick go and do, I'll be super quick, and then hopefully there'll be a couple of questions. And just drop that in there and do a file, save as. And I did create a folder this morning, I think, yeah, with digital, and I just call it something like index.html. Super simple. That's about as technical as it gets to deploy this virtual assistant onto a website. And so now I should be able to go in here and double click index.html. I'll open a new web page with a little, you're all familiar with the little icon. This is customizable, right? This is just out of the box look and feel. We can customize it to say stuff and different text, different styles, different colors to match your website. You click it, and you're prompted with that welcome, hi, how can I help you today? And then, what are COVID symptoms? And actually, for the crack, it should, maybe this is a bit too bad, but maybe, yeah, all right, even with my terrible spelling. And that's kind of just, maybe not a great example, but it's just an example that, what we're working with here is a natural, or rather a natural language classifier, a class that's been trained, and it's not actually worried about the spelling once it's close enough. I think what I'll do is I'll stop there. I hope you found that informative. Hope the slides kept you engaged, and the demo proved that it really is dead easy to get started with one of these things with Watson, right? So I should say it with IBM and with Watson. So
that's fascinating, Ronan. Thanks a million. Cool. When I was researching Watson last night, actually, I saw that it's named after the IBM founder and first CEO.
Yeah.
I thought you had a Sherlock Holmes fan in your midst. Since it's, there's an assistant relationship there. We've got a number of questions already, so that's brilliant. So I'm gonna crack those, if that's okay with you, Ronan.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
How is the security of personal data maintained and stored, and can conversation logs be audited if required?
Yeah, it's really good, and it's really and I've opened the Q&A here, so you can see I think that looked like it came in from Derek. So that's really, Derek, it's like, again, in business, it's probably one of the probably the second question that gets asked. So the first one is like, how quick can I get one of these? And then what about the data that gets shared? So I'll answer the conversation logs be audited. Yeah, they can, right? So that's easy. The logs are available to be pulled, downloaded if needed, and you do whatever you want with them at that point, right? You perform analysis in the way that I just mentioned around, looking at the conversations that are being had, and does our virtual assistant need more training to, can they be audited? Yeah, for whatever particular audit request or requirement you're looking to address. In terms of the secure data, and personal data, it comes up all the time. And I think, in terms of the way in which we store the data on our cloud platform, with the controls and governance that we have on the cloud platform, and the standards that we can attest to when working with clients, they're generally quite comfortable that, we don't have access to the data. The data is their data. We don't use let's say the training data that you've just seen that I entered into my virtual assistant there. That again is the client's data. We wouldn't use that to further train other AI services. It's kind of a thing that IBM tries to differentiate ourselves on relative to some of the competition. Actually, if you Google that one, right, rather than have me do the IBM sales pitch on you, but you'll see that the way in which we treat the data on our cloud platform when it comes to AI, we say we treat it differently relative to some of the competition who will use your data to train their services further. So we provide attestations, standards, and regulations that we adhere to when it comes to the managing of data. That tends to, in like 99% of the cases, to ensure and assure the clients that we work with that the data that gets shared with the virtual assistant is good and no one has a concern with it. But then when there are those businesses, organizations that do have the concern, I did mention that it's one of the kind of deployment options that we have, where yes, you can get AI off of the cloud, you can get it this afternoon or later this morning if you wanted to build a bot and for your website. But actually, if you're that organization that still isn't comfortable with those, the things I just mentioned, the standards, the regulations, the compliance, that we'll deliver assurances around, you can host this, in your data center, and your IT staff can manage, the data that gets generated in all the ways that might adhere to the regulation that's applicable to you in your industry. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we might move on to our next question, Ronan, which is the typical cost for a smaller organization. Like I'm guessing, in so many of the examples you've given around using it in customer service appear to be maybe from larger organizations.
Yeah.
Who no doubt, thinking even about their training data and the volume of data that they would have in their call center that would help the AI to understand and to respond correctly. So I'm guessing scale is a big factor.
It is, yeah. But
not just in terms of cost, but in other ways too.
Yes. I would like to give an answer to this as, typical cost for a small org, you can get started for free, right? And you genuinely can, right? And I know of an organization that went live yesterday on a free tier that I was just using of Watson Assistant, in a way that what they want to do is they've hosted the assistant on their website. And it's actually a site that's going to get a lot of traffic. And it gets used by, I can't give it away, but I could say it gets used by students who are second level a lot, who are looking up information on future education. And they just went live yesterday with a free tier, because actually what they want to see is what level of traffic is going to come through on their virtual assistant, so that they can start to think of, right, we're going to have to up it a tier, to start to maybe pay. So it's a hard one actually to estimate.
You can start for free.
Sorry?
You can start for free.
Yeah, genuinely you can, and that's not the sales spoof. That's truth. Yeah.
But that's an interesting point, I suppose. It just shows that you get started and then you get your intelligence. And would it be fair to say the bot starts to get better as it starts to handle queries?
Yeah. That's exactly the pattern. Like so even take the free bit out of the equation, but even for organizations that have, worked with IBM and bought services from IBM to build and deploy, often when they stick the bot out live for the first time, it's an MVP, it's a minimum viable product. It's what we think the virtual assistant is going to get asked. We find out very quickly that it's getting asked a whole bunch of other things. And so we need to, there's never an end. It's a continuous learning cycle. It's an iterative development cycle when one of these things goes live, if you want to be able to, address the queries that are coming through.
Or even sometimes you see, actually, when you see bots on website, they'll say, hello, I am a training bot.
Yeah.
So I won't be able to tell you everything right now, but they have that disclaimer that they're still in training, I guess. But anyway, we keep going, Ronan.
Yeah.
Ronan have a view on the use of virtual assistants in a field sales environment, e.g. accessing real-time customer data, auto-scheduling.
Yeah. Do you know who does this, Derek? There's another one of your Derek questions. Salesforce do that. I know that. If you're a field sales, not that I'm saying that their tech is better than ours, it's not, but I know that they, with their CRM solution, have virtual assistants that are aligned with that, that they position for the field sales individual that can access, let's say, the CRM, that is the Salesforce CRM, so that they have the, as you say in your question, the real-time customer data and the like. So we do it too. Salesforce very much in that space.
Okay. Yeah. You can probably see the next question, but just to synopsize it, in your view, who's the global leader of AI and bot technology at the moment? Who's investing heavily to become a future leader? And are any of them non-Western companies like Alibaba?
Oh, it's brilliant. Really good question. Do you know what, anonymous attendee? We have a number of different ways in which you can measure, right, who's truly the global leader, right? So but one of the ways from a business perspective is, the analyst firm Gartner, and they will often produce their magic quadrants around various elements of technology, cloud infrastructure as a service, conversational AI, insights engines. I'm proud to say that IBM, from the AI perspective in the magic quadrants in 2021, is leading the field, which is great, and it's something that we can brag about at the moment. Not all, it's an ever evolving field, and competition is hot on our field, on our toes. But in the AI space, from a Gartner, from a business analyst perspective, top right hand quadrant and top right hand corner is IBM at the moment, which is great.
Okay. I'm sure the next one is a question that you get in many formats occasionally, but is there a risk of AI-based conversational technology becoming pathological or acted intending?
It's all about training. You're right, anonymous attendee. That isn't there that example of, didn't Microsoft put out a virtual assistant? I can't remember what the example is, but you'll find it if you Google it, and didn't it very quickly become it was giving racial slurs, I think, in terms of responses to questions, because people had the ability to pass in questions with suggested answers, and I think it very quickly was pulled off the. So, and I don't say that, sorry, to I'm not. And actually, maybe in case it's being recorded, maybe put a disclaimer around that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but that's an example that I seem to recount, and I'm not saying that to any way knock Microsoft. It's just an example of, I think, AI getting out there in a way that people could influence its training and its responses that were given.
Yeah, well, you do sometimes read pieces about that, about their biases. Not just like web interface based ones, but maybe voice assisted ones, but the person is right. Doesn't that come down to your training and how you're actually handling the bot that you put in place?
Yeah, no, and that's a brilliant angle, Caroline. Sorry, I didn't pick up on that myself. Like the bias in AI is hugely important, and a hugely important field, and a hugely evolving field as well, right? In terms of and to the question, like where the question is and tails off, it's all about training. It is, and there can be bias in the training data that in turn can lead to the AI being, making biased decisions, whether it be around, the insurance policy, and whether or not that insurance policy is granted, or based on previous examples saying that insurance, in the training data, that insurance wasn't made available to an individual with a certain profile. All about training.
Yeah. Now, this question, I would say typically we will have a lot of people that are in smaller organizations or startups. So this person, your presentation makes it look easy. Have initiatives for SMEs. And for startups. Maybe actually we have a couple of minutes. You might kind of talk about the why for a smaller organization. You've talked about kind of how to get started and that you can do it. That alignment part, whether it's the best solution, whether you really need it, and then how you might manage it when maybe you don't have a lot of resources.
I guess you're right, Caroline. There is, the importance of addressing the business need. Like, what is the need you're trying to serve? But if you do find that you've got, a number of queries that are maybe coming through, email, let's say, into your organization at the moment, and you're having to have folks on the other side of them pick up the questions and answer them manually with a mail back, then a virtual assistant may well be a great place for you to take out that workload and address the queries online with the assistant. I really want to dispel that myth around the IBM is for the large companies. Historically, I think people might have perceived us as that. But we do have startup programs for startups that can get access to technology and support from IBM in the same way that they can from the other let's say the cloud services providers. And actually, I do have examples of many of the startups that I've worked with to stand up a virtual assistant, and they're hosted and live on their site. I'm maybe not at liberty to say who they are, but I am more than willing for that person. My Twitter handle again. Actually, maybe I should have stopped sharing my screen because I'm just
no, you're fine.
A black slide for people to get bored looking at. But that's me. Whoever.
Technology.
Yeah, drop me a line, no worries, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. And if you've got something you want to progress.
Okay, Ronan, we're at time, but we might just breeze through the last two questions that here very quickly.
Yeah.
your chatbot can answer the majority of the basic functional and transactional questions from your customers, do you need to have this information on the website itself? That let's say you're using the web interface.
Yeah. So, you know, the person who asked that question then, it's a real common pattern, right, where the information is on your website, but people are finding it hard to find. What the virtual assistant will do is kind of be on the front page of your site, and the person asks it the question about where can I get information on your opening hours, and the bot responds with a link, and the person clicks the link and they go to that page on the site. So it's all about style. It's all about how you want the bot. You know, do you want all that information to live in the virtual assistant? Is that where, you know, you want to be able to easily maintain that info, or should the info actually quite rightly sit on your site on a particular page, but actually have the assistant being the one that helps the end user navigate and get to the place where they get the info that's accurate for them.
And you learn very quickly about your website and what's visible and what's when you see what's coming through on your bot, won't you?
Yeah.
Final question, really quick. Ronan, from a non-tech background, enjoyed your presentation. The idea your free application can be used as a test to see how it's received. Would it be hard to move data at a later stage if you wanted to progress?
No, it's not at all. You see, it's actually the hardness there is actually the pay tiers. And I have to say as well, like once you go into the first pay tier, it's still buttons that you're going to pay for when you go with IBM, when you start to pay for the virtual assistant. So there's no technical move, you know. So if you've got a virtual assistant, you've stood it up on a free tier, and you think this is going gangbusters, but actually, you know what, the volume of traffic we're getting now, IBM is throttling us, and we do, and we will on the free tier. You'll get something like I'll have to look at the site, something like 5,000 conversations a month for free. But you find, geez, we're getting 10,000. And 5,000 of those are being turned away from, and they're getting no answer from the bots. We need to up a tier. That's a payment exercise. So the hardness there is a payment exercise. It's not a data transfer exercise. We just up the limits on your account. So
okay, all right. Well, we have hit time. I think that was so interesting.
Good.
Very heartening, I think, for a lot of us on the line as well to see what can be done relatively quickly using WhatsApp. So thanks so much for your time, Ronan. Massively appreciate it.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a million for the opportunity, Caroline and team. Yeah, and thanks for those that attended this morning. And more than happy to hear from any of you at Daltonology. Brilliant.
Daltonology is the Twitter handle. So that's fantastic. Thanks a million, Ronan.
Magic. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our next session featuring Gary Fox. He's the host of the Entrepreneur Experiment. And this next session is going to be about podcasting. It begins at 10:30 a.m. So 15 minutes. So be sure to tune into that. You should have the link for that. Okay. So thanks so much. We hope we see you in 15 minutes. So 13 minutes actually. Thanks.